Once upon a time, there was a little mer-dragon who was very sad as he got bullied for living underwater but having fire powers. Because of this, he had no friends. Instead, he would spend his days exploring, finding new creatures and plants. His favorite of all time were the pangolin snails. The little mer-dragon has his own little treasure cove with things sailors would drop in pangolin snail hangouts. He has a lot of anchors, although he does wonder why everyone keeps dropping them. Sometimes he likes to make up stories, where it's not people dropping them, but instead it was the ocean stealing gifts for him, or maybe even the pangolin snails. One day, when he was sitting on a rock happily, a group of land dragons came along. "Hey, come fly with us! We're going to the forest." "Oh wait, you can't leave the ocean!" They laughed. The little mer-dragon was mad, and he shot a burst of fire towards them. He knew his fire was nowhere strong enough to reach them, but the dragons ran away, screaming of the evil mer-dragon who had fire. He felt a burst of joy, but it slowly flickered out as he thought of the consequences the fire would bring. "One day my treasure cove will be full of gold too," he thought, as he dove back into the water to go back to his treasure cove and play with the pangolin snails. But when he got back, his treasure was all gone. Nothing remained except for a single pangolin snail shell. The mer-dragon breathed out a quick blast of fire in frustration, and then set himself on the cove floor and began sniffing around for clues. He saw a red dragon tail disappear around the corner just as he came out of his treasure cove, and followed it to the surface where he found the dragons that teased him earlier, burning all his treasure and kidnapping the pangolin snails. "Hey, that's mine! Give it back!" he shouted. "Oops, it's gone. Maybe if you were more useful, we would give you some of our treasure," they said. "That's what you get for trying to burn us. You should know that, unlike you, all of us land dragons are fireproof." "What can I do to prove myself?" the little mer-dragon asked. "Well, there is one thing you can do. Bring us the heart of the ocean from the deepest, darkest depths of the sea." As the land dragons flew away, the little mer-dragon curled into a ball and began to sob. Oh, his treasure! And his poor little pangolin snails. The little mer-dragon wiped away his tears. He knew that he had to get the heart of the sea, even if it was only to save his pangolin snails. Luckily, he knew a pangolin snail that knows where the heart of the sea is. They live not too far away. I'd heard of the legends of the heart of the sea before, so he knew he was looking for a giant dark emerald gray snail that had the striking resemblance to the pangolin snails. The heart of the sea was actually a collection of thousands of clear pearls that the giant snail guarded. Hopefully he could convince them to let him take one. Maybe as a fellow snail, he could use the fact that he was saving pangolin snails to his advantage? The emerald snail lived inside a volcano, guarded by an army of giant lobsters and crabs. The little mer-dragon knew that if he wanted to get to the heart of the ocean, he was going to have to get through them first. And they were not kind to strangers, particularly ones that wanted the heart. He did have a surprise though, his fire. He would need a better plan than just fire, but at least he had something. The little mer-dragon hid behind a rock. In front of him were the volcano palace of the Emerald Snail King. Not far away, hundreds of crabs and lobsters patrolled the ocean floor. He decided to try and negotiate first. Whenever he was nervous, his breath came out of puffs of fire. However, his fire had to be kept a secret. As such, he stayed there for at least 15 minutes, breathing in and out until he was breathing normal water. Then he stepped forward. "Halt! Who goes there?" a giant crab yelled. "I need to get into the palace and save my friends. Can you let me in? They're snails, just like the Snail King." The crab laughed. "Nice try, kid. We're not letting you in. No one gets in the palace unless the Snail King says so. Now run along, or we'll make you regret coming here." The little mer-dragon knew that talking wouldn't work, and he had to try and sneak in. One lucky thing about the curse of fire was that it made him more purpley and less cold blue color. And this let him blend in with the rocks. So with that, he turned and swam away, starting to plan his route into the castle. He would return in 3 or 4 hours once the crabs and lobsters were less alert. He just hoped that his pangolin snails survived the hours. He decided to pass the time by meditating, something he hadn't done in a long time. He found a flat rock on the seabed and lay down on it, closing his eyes and attempting to relax. Normally he could never figure out how to meditate, but for some reason today, he could. He paid attention to his surroundings, feeling each current of water blow by. His feelings of peace, however, were short-lived, and before long he realized that he needed to start planning again. He noticed that the top of the volcano was unguarded because the giant lobsters and crabs would burn in that heat. If he skimmed the top of the ocean, the crabs and the lobsters wouldn't notice him. He just had to hope that what the land dragon said was true, and that dragons were indeed immune to fire. Little did he know that the top of the volcano was infested by firebugs, a species he had never heard of. And so, he skimmed the ocean surface and dove down into the volcano. "Hey!" shouted a lobster. But he was already in. By the time he noticed the firebugs, it was too late to back out. The firebugs leapt at the chance to attack, starved. He looked around in a panic, but the volcano's walls were too high to climb, and the floor was too far to fall to. As the firebugs crawled closer, the little mer-dragon's grip on the walls of the volcano slipped. He covered his eyes with his wings, Wings! He had wings! He let go of the volcano's walls and flapped as hard as he could. However, he didn't have much experience with flying through the air compared to swimming in the water, and his wings were too weak to lift him to any significant heights. In his moment of panic, he noticed an opening in the far end of the crater, a tunnel that seemed to lead to somewhere. He grabbed onto the edge of the tunnel in the last possible moment and pulled himself up, still shaking off firebugs. Luckily, he was immune to fire as he was a dragon. Despite the fact that the firebugs couldn't follow him, he moved as fast as he could. However, in the tight tunnel, his fast was no more than a crawl. He saw a light at the end of the small tunnel and did his best to crawl out. His head popped out first, and he was blinded by the light. "How did you get into the air vent?" exclaimed a very surprised Emerald Snow King. The Merdragon said, but at this point his voice failed him. If he had broken into most king's throne rooms, he would be dead already. Luckily though, he had chosen a kind king who was basically naturally covered in armor, and so did not fear for his life easily. "Come out of the vent first, then we can talk." The little Merdragon pulled himself out of the vent. "So why are you here?" My friends are taken and I need the heart of the sea to rescue them. They're snails, just like you." The Emerald Snow King smiled. "Well, you truly are a brave soul. Getting into my palace is no easy feat. However, I do fear there's nothing I can do for you," he said, his voice sounding as grainy as the sand floor. "Each heart of the sea controls part of the ocean. I couldn't very well make it so that the tide stopped turning or the fish stopped swimming. I just need to save my friends. Is there anything else that you can give me?" asked the little Merdragon. No one has ever seen the heart of the sea except for me. I can give you one of my scales, and then you can say that it's the heart of the sea. Each one of my scales can grant one wish. I hope you use it wisely. Use it to help stop those bullies." "Did you know that was what I needed the heart for?" The Snail King simply smiled. "I know everything." Thank you, the little Merdragon said as the King Snail gently pulled out a scale and handed it to him. Then he turned and swam off. He debated on if he should use the scale to save his snails using the wish, or give them the scale to get the snails back. The little Merdragon swam back into his cave, clutching the scale tightly. The words of the Emerald Snail King echoed inside his head. "One wish. Use it wisely. Stop those bullies." After a while, the little Merdragon finally made up his mind. He was going to use the scale so that he could fight the other dragons. "I wish I wouldn't dry out on land." The scale shimmered emerald green, and then to his surprise, slowly became clear. Oh, he has a clear, roundish object, just like the myths of the heart of the ocean had told. And with that, he went to go find the bullies. However, that proved to be a harder challenge than he expected. He had no idea on how to move on land. He swam up to the beach by the rock he usually sunbathes on and crawled up to the edge of the water. He let the waves rock his body, closed his eyes, and took a step. "Hey!" he laughed. "This is just like walking along the ocean floor." He tripped and fell. Well, not exactly, but pretty close. Then the little Merdragon remembered the bullies mentioning a forest. He began walking towards a forest he saw on his right, stumbling here and there, but definitely improving. He came across a stone path and then a patch of grass with no trees. There he saw the mean land dragons tossing his treasured pangolin snails back and forth. "Hey!" he shouted, catching their attention. "I got the heart!" He held the scale up and it shined in the sun. The land dragons stopped in their tracks. "Wow! It really is the heart of the ocean! Sorry we doubted you. Can I have it?" said the red one. "I'll give you half of my treasure." "No, me!" said the green one. "I'll give you even more." The Merdragon grinned. "I will give it to you only if you return all the stolen treasure. And don't bother anyone ever again." The land dragons hesitate and steal a glance at each other. Finally, one of them nodded in approval and the green one ran to get their treasure. Little did they know, this was only a small part of the Merdragon's revenge. The little Merdragon hid the scale in a bush and waited for their arrival. Soon the green dragon returned with all the pangolin snails. "Where's the heart?" she asked. "I'll tell you when you put back all the treasure," said the little Merdragon. After some time, all of the dragons came back, battered and bruised. "We did what you asked. Now what?" "The heart is right over there, in that bush." The land dragons rushed over and quarreled over it. The Merdragon didn't want to hurt the bullies, despite how mean they were, but he did want to teach them a lesson. He had no idea what the scale would do, so he ran to a nearby tree and watched to see what would happen. The land dragons were now fighting over it. Two of them were trying to pull it apart, and then, boom! The scale broke, shattering into a million pieces, turning the dragons into pangolin snails. The little Merdragon couldn't help but giggle, even though he knew that with the wish used, the scale's magic wouldn't last long. "I leave you guys for 1 minute and you guys turn into pangolin snails? Seriously? You're all coming with me." However, the land dragons did not know the magic was temporary. "What have you done to us?" the red one screamed. "I will turn you all back into dragons if you promise to never be mean again. Don't you see what it feels like to be a pangolin snail? What if I threw you around?" "We promise!" the land dragons responded in a panic, and poof, the dragons turned back into their original forms. I hope you learned your lesson. the merdragon said. "We're sorry we teased you before. We realized that we were being kind of mean," the dragon said. "Well, we could be friends as long as you don't do it again," the little merdragon smiled. "See you around!" And with that, the little merdragon headed back to the ocean with his pangolin snails in tow. The end.